The wind, high in the Andes, carries the scent of damp earth and the deep, silent wisdom of forgotten time. It whispers through canyons, carved not just by water, but by epochs, a slow, deliberate breath across the roof of the world. Here, where the mountains are more than geology, but Apus, living, breathing deities, lies the territory of the Inca and the lingering phantom of their greatest secret. We begin our journey not in the blazing sun of a rediscovered city, but in the shadowed mist where myth and geography coalesce. This is the region known to history as Vilcabamba. Not a single place, but a vast, treacherous province, a last, desperate sanctuary carved from the heart of the jungle-clad peaks. For nearly 40 years after the arrival of Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors, this was the last bastion of the Inca resistance, the final defiant ember of a colossal empire. The Spanish sought gold, but what they hunted with far greater fervor was legitimacy. They needed to extinguish the lineage of the Sapa Inca entirely, yet the royal line, led by figures like Manco Inca and later Tupac Amaru, repeatedly retreated into these inaccessible fastnesses. The very name Vilcabamba became synonymous with an impenetrable mystery, a golden refuge, always just beyond the reach of European steel and greed. It was the ultimate retreat, the place where the Inca cosmology itself was meant to survive. The Spanish, consumed by the fever of El Dorado, the myth of the Golden King or the Golden City, imagined Vilcabamba as a glittering metropolis overflowing with treasure. In truth, it was a practical, sprawling series of settlements, connected by a network of engineered paths, bridges, and agricultural terraces, designed for survival, not merely display. The true treasure of Vilcabamba was its inaccessibility, its genius hidden behind a relentless gauntlet of altitude, dense cloud forest, and treacherous ravines. The narrative of conquest is typically a tale of swift, decisive battles. But here, the true enemy was the landscape. The mountains themselves fought for the Inca. Imagine the European soldier accustomed to the plains of Castile, struggling to breathe, hacking through jungle growth, constantly soaked by the perpetual mist, and always, always wary of the chasm, the vertical drops that defined this cruel geography. The Inca, children of these same mountains, understood that distance and height were their strongest weapons. Every path was a natural fortification, every ridge a vantage point. The strategic importance of the Vilcabamba region was therefore built on one central, uncompromising fact. To control this land, one must conquer the void. This quest for the last Inca city was the defining geographic mystery of colonial South America, a riddle that persisted for centuries. Even after the historical fall of the last Sapa Inca in 1572, the specter of a surviving, hidden city, a true El Dorado, clung to the imagination. Tales passed down through generations of local Quechua guides spoke of magnificent stone structures deep within the jungle, a place abandoned yet fiercely protected by the mountain spirits. These were not the bombastic legends of gold, but the subtle, persistent whispers of stone and memory. It is into this atmosphere of historical yearning and geographic isolation that the modern chapter of our story opens. For centuries, explorers chased the shadow of Vilcabamba. They found ruins, yes, but nothing that matched the scale of the empire, nothing that felt like the sacred center they knew must exist. They were looking in the wrong places, or perhaps they were simply looking too hard for the wrong thing. They searched for the great sprawling capital. The Inca, with their quiet wisdom, had instead built a sanctuary. The location of the eventual discovery is critical to understanding the entire lore. It is situated on a narrow, forested saddle between two towering peaks, Machu Picchu, Old Peak, and Huayna Picchu, Young Peak, high above the Urubamba River. The river, at this point, performs a dramatic serpentine coil, creating a natural moat around the base of the mountain. This particular secluded niche was known only to a few local farming families who used the ancient terraces for their humble crops. The Inca's choice of this site, nestled deep within the Vilcabamba folds, speaks volumes about their priorities. It was not easily defensible in the conventional sense of a fortress, but it was profoundly hidden. From below, the cloud forest effectively obscured the entire structure. From above, it appeared merely as another rugged mountain flank. It was a city designed to disappear into the contours of the sacred landscape, a final act of profound reverence for the mountains that had sheltered their people. It was an escape not just from the Spanish, but from the brutal logic of war itself. This secrecy, this successful evasion of discovery for over 350 years, hinged entirely on the mastery of the treacherous Andean pathways. The ability of the Inca to navigate, build, and maintain their transportation network through such unforgiving terrain is the true, unsung secret of the lost city. It brings us to the core of this script, the genius of the Inca rope bridges. Without these suspension structures, crafted from woven grass and anchored deep into the rock, the sheer ravines and raging torrents would have created impassable barriers. The bridges were the arteries of the empire, and crucially, the ultimate choke points of their retreat. When the Inca retreated into Vilcabamba, they systematically dismantled or burned these bridges behind them, erasing their own footsteps and making pursuit impossible. Thus, the journey to understand the lore of Machu Picchu must be twofold. It is a journey into the cosmology of stone, the architecture and astronomy of the citadel itself, and an equally important journey into the engineering of passage, the roads, and the incredible flexible rope bridges that made the Vilcabamba sanctuary possible. The city is the monument, the rope bridge is the key that kept the monument hidden. As the sun begins its slow descent over the peaks, casting long, deep shadows that momentarily seem to give shape to the Apus, we feel the weight of this ancient lore. We are not yet in the city, but we are deep within its atmosphere, the perpetual hush of a place that knew how to keep its own counsel. The stage is set for the man who would eventually stumble upon this silence, a man whose ambition was rooted in history, but whose success lay in listening to the faint, persistent whispers of the mountains. The centuries turned, the mist thickened, and the great secret of the Vilcabamba peaks remained undisturbed. The memory of the lost city was relegated to the realm of folklore, a tale told by the Quechua people in the flickering light of their mountain homes. and dismissed by serious scholars in the clamorous libraries of the West. Yet history often chooses the most unlikely vessels for its grandest revelations. Our next figure is not a hardened treasure hunter, nor a lifelong archaeologist, but a Yale lecturer of Latin American history, a man named Hiram Bingham III. Bingham's initial pursuit was not Machu Picchu, but the historical Vilcabamba, the actual last refuge of the Incas, whose demise was recorded in 1572. He was drawn to the grand, compelling narrative of the last independent Inca resistance, seeking concrete evidence to validate the historical record of their final stand against the Spanish crown. This goal imbued his 1911 expedition with a scholarly seriousness, setting it apart from the purely avaricious hunts of earlier explorers. He was seeking a historical fact, not merely fortune. Bingham was a man of the early 20th century, ambitious, energetic, and possessed of that certain academic zeal that blurs the line between research and adventure. He arrived in Peru armed with maps that were largely speculative, guides whose knowledge was a mix of fact and fragmented legend, and an unwavering belief that the key to the Incas' final moments was still hidden in the complex geography of the Andes. His journey in 1911 began with the traditional and well-known ruins closer to the valleys, but a persistent local rumor drew his attention away from the established paths. In the small, remote settlement of Mondor Pampa, near the base of the towering peaks, he encountered a local family, the Richarte family, who spoke of ancient, extensive ruins high on the ridge. Crucially, they referred to the mountain as Machu Picchu, the old peak. This was the thread woven from local knowledge and simple happenstance that would eventually unravel the greatest mystery of the Inca Empire. The fateful morning of July 24, 1911, saw Bingham and his small party, accompanied by a Peruvian soldier and a local boy named Pablito, make the arduous ascent. The conditions were typical for the cloud forest: dense foliage, slippery slopes, and a relentless soaking mist. It was an intimidating climb, an ascent into an area so thoroughly reclaimed by nature that it seemed improbable anything of human creation could still exist. The soft, slow narration pauses here to emphasize the sheer contrast of the moment. Imagine Bingham, a man of books and lecture halls, emerging from the dense green shroud into an impossible expanse of tailored stone. The account of that day suggests a profound, immediate silence, broken only by the drip of moisture and the sudden rush of the wind high above the canyon. He recorded his initial impressions with a mixture of academic detachment and stunned awe. The sheer scale, the perfection of the craftsmanship, and the strategic location high above the Urubamba River convinced him that he had found a city of immense significance. But what exactly was it? Bingham initially speculated he had found Vilcabamba, the last Inca capital. This misidentification, which he clung to for some time, was understandable given his focus. He saw a city hidden, a place of last resort, a secret retreat. Later research would clarify that the historical Vilcabamba was located elsewhere, but the sheer symbolic weight of Machu Picchu as a lost city resonated immediately with the global imagination, fueled by his vivid articles in National Geographic.
The discovery, however, quickly became a point of profound controversy, a necessary part of the lore. Bingham was not the first non-indigenous person to see the ruins. The Richarte family and others were already farming there. Local land records indicated that the site had been known to a handful of Peruvian residents for years. His great contribution was not initial sight, but publicity and the archaeological removal of the site from obscurity. He brought the world's scientific attention to the citadel, catalogued the ruins, and began the long process of clearing the forest and studying the structures. The subsequent Yale-Peruvian expeditions in the following years involved meticulously clearing the vegetation, revealing the full extent of the architectural genius. It was only as the walls, temples, and terraces emerged from the jungle that the city's true character began to assert itself. A royal estate, a sacred retreat, a ceremonial center, and an astronomical observatory. It was a testament to the Incas' ability to live in profound harmony with their terrifyingly vertical environment. Bingham's actions, while bringing the site to the world, also initiated a complex ethical debate that still echoes today. He excavated thousands of artifacts, ceramics, bronze objects, and human remains, and transported them to Yale University for study, an act that Peru would later spend decades fighting to reverse. The whisper of his name, therefore, is tied not just to the initial thrill of discovery, but to the long, careful process of defining ownership over history and heritage. The narrative of Hiram Bingham III closes with his realization that this city was perhaps more important than the capital he sought. It was a perfectly preserved slice of Inca life, abandoned not in violence, but in silence. A profound structural ellipsis in the story of the conquest. It stands as a silent monument, not to war, but to the Inca spirit, an architectural statement of resilience against the inevitable, hidden high above the fray.
Having passed through the whispers of history and the shadows of the discoverer's ambition, we now commit ourselves fully to the geography that defines the lost city. To truly appreciate Machu Picchu is not merely to stand among its stones, but to undergo the ascent, the physical and spiritual transformation that was and remains the fundamental experience of any visitor. The journey begins far below, in the moist, warm air of the Urubamba River Valley. Here, the Urubamba, a river considered sacred by the Inca, a tributary of the great Amazon and a celestial mirror of the Milky Way, roars with a relentless energy perpetually shaping the canyon floor. Its sound is a constant, deep-throated drone, a baseline of primeval power that the Inca engineers sought to tame and harness. Our ascent is a journey away from this primal sound and toward the eerie silence of the heights. The path is unforgivingly vertical. It is a testament to the Inca's belief that effort and difficulty sanctify the destination. The lower slopes are consumed by cloud forest, an ecosystem defined by perpetual moisture and dense, lush growth. Here, the air hangs heavy, saturated with the scent of orchids, moss, and decaying matter. The stone path, part of the immense Capac Ñan,
the great Inca road system, is not merely a trail, but a meticulously engineered staircase. Each step is a slab of rock, strategically placed, designed to manage water runoff and prevent erosion, enduring centuries of seismic shift and relentless weather. As we climb, the perspective shifts slowly, dramatically. The vast, coiling Urubamba, initially a noisy giant, shrinks into a silver ribbon far below, its power muted by distance. The sensation of isolation intensifies. The city is not visible, it is concealed, designed to hide itself until the final, dramatic moment. This deliberate concealment suggests that the journey was intended as a ritual, a process of purification and transition. One does not casually arrive at Machu Picchu. One must earn the rite of passage through vertical devotion. The atmosphere thins, the air grows cooler, and the mist, the Pachapuyu to the Quechua, begins to dominate. This mist is crucial to the city's lore. It acts as a natural curtain, not only protecting the city from prying eyes, but also filtering the sunlight, creating an atmosphere of perpetual mystery and sanctity. When the mist is heavy, the stone walls emerge and disappear like phantoms, suggesting a place that exists only temporarily in the physical realm, belonging more truly to the world of the spirits. The first definitive sign of human presence that breaks the natural canopy is the terrace system, the andenes. This is the architectural introduction to the citadel, a preliminary statement of Inca genius that immediately separates the human realm from the wild mountain. These terraces, stretching out like the precise folds of a colossal green fan, are not merely agricultural fields, they are structural buttresses. Built upon the incredibly steep, unstable slopes, they perform a dual function, securing the mountain itself against landslides and providing fertile, well-drained ground for crops. To describe the terraces is to describe the Inca relationship with Pachamama. The walls are a blend of art and engineering, built of dry stacked field stones, slightly slanted inwards to resist the outward pressure of the soil. Beneath the topsoil, the Inca laid multiple layers of coarse gravel and crushed rock. This sophisticated drainage system prevented water from building up and sliding the entire mountain into the river, allowing the city to stand for 5 centuries on land that would otherwise have collapsed within a generation.
As we finally crest the last set of terraces and pass through the outer defensive wall, less a military barrier and more a ceremonial gate, the full magnitude of the citadel unfolds. The sudden reveal is breathtaking, a moment of profound disquiet. The city is not built on the mountain, but appears to be built from it, as if the living rock itself has crystallized into architecture. The entire settlement is arranged with an acute understanding of topography, following the natural saddle between Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu. The layout immediately establishes its purpose. The city is broadly divided into 2 main zones, separated by a deep, natural chasm and a series of steps. The agricultural sector, upper terraces. This lower area, already ascended, is dominated by the terraces and storage houses, kolkas. It speaks to the practical necessity of sustainability and self-sufficiency,
ensuring the sacred inhabitants could be provisioned high above the valleys. The urban sector, Upper Citadel. This is the core, further split into the sacred district, temples and ritual spaces, and the residential district, noble and commoner housing. The most striking feature upon arrival is the deliberate architectural reverence for the surrounding peaks. Every major structure, the Temple of the Sun, the Intihuatana, the main temple, is aligned not just astronomically, but topographically. They are arranged to frame or point toward the Apus, the mountain spirits. Machu Picchu, the towering sentinel behind the city, is framed in such a way that it becomes an integral part of the main plaza, a stone deity peering over the human domain. This leads us to the critical philosophical conclusion about Machu Picchu's true identity. It was not a military fortress, nor an administrative capital. The lack of extensive defenses, the presence of highly specialized astronomical temples, and the exclusive distant location all suggest a different function. It was most likely a royal estate and sacred retreat for the Sapa Inca, perhaps built during the reign of Pachacuti in the mid-15th century. It was a place for ritual, contemplation, and the continuation of the Inca's most sacred duty, the observation and worship of the sun, Inti, and the earth, Pachamama. The sheer difficulty of the ascent, the isolation, and the perfect integration with the cloud-swept mountains all reinforce the idea of exclusivity. This was a city for the elite, for the priests, astronomers, and the Akla, chosen women. It was a place to reconnect with the cosmic order, to govern the empire, not through military might, but through celestial authority. Standing now within the silent city, feeling the smooth, cold surface of the granite underfoot, we recognize that the entire structure is an act of spiritual engineering. The stones are cut and fitted not just for permanence, but to honor the line and curve of the mountain. This sensitivity to the land is the highest form of Inca art. It is a slow, soft answer to the question of power. Power to the Inca was not in domination, but in harmony. The city is an architectural hymn sung to the mountains. Our ascent is complete. We have passed the threshold of the known world and entered the sanctuary where the Inca sought their final peace. We are now prepared to look closely at the language they inscribed in the stone itself.
Having made the sacred ascent, we now turn our attention from the setting to the substance of the city, the stone itself. For the Inca, stone was not merely a building material. It was a medium for communication, a repository of spiritual power, and a direct link to the Apus, the living mountains. The architecture of Machu Picchu is a profound study in applied cosmology, where every wall, every corner, and every fitted block speaks a silent language of reverence, precision, and permanence. The most celebrated feature of Inca architecture, and the one that defines the entire citadel, is their technique of ashlar masonry. This is stonework without mortar, where precisely cut stones are fitted together so tightly that even today, a knife blade or a sheet of paper cannot be inserted between the joints. This level of precision,
achieved without metal tools and on a monumental scale, remains one of the greatest enduring mysteries of ancient engineering. The sheer difficulty of the process, which involved pounding and sanding the faces of irregular stones with harder rocks until they interlocked perfectly, suggests that the labor itself was a religious offering. The time and effort invested were an act of devotion to the deity who provided the stone, reflecting the Inca belief in Aini, the sacred principle of reciprocity. Giving immense effort to the stone meant the stone, in turn, would provide eternal sanctuary. Observe the polygonal stonework found in the foundational walls and the most important temples. Unlike the squared blocks of Roman or Greek architecture, these stones are often irregular, featuring multiple faces, 6, 12, or even more, each fitting exactly into its neighbors. This design, seemingly chaotic, is actually a masterpiece of seismic engineering. When an earthquake, a frequent and powerful force in this Andean region, shakes the foundation, the interlocking irregular faces of the stones allow the structure to dance and flex slightly. The walls shift, but do not crumble. Without the rigid presence of mortar, which would fracture under stress, the stones settle back into their original, perfect alignment. This ingenuity ensures that the city, which sits in one of the world's most seismically active zones, has survived for over 5 centuries, while colonial-era Spanish constructions, built with European mortar techniques, have repeatedly failed. The Inca discovered the secret of flexible stability. This perfection in stone also speaks to the hierarchy and purpose of the structures. In Machu Picchu, one can read the function of a building simply by observing the quality of its stone. Common structures use rough fieldstone blocks, often held together with mud mortar, practical and efficient. Royal or noble residences feature rectangular, carefully dressed stones fitted with precision, signifying rank and durability. Sacred temples exhibit the most sublime, flawless ashlar masonry, often featuring stones of tremendous size and multi-angle joints. This level of craftsmanship was reserved for the direct worship of Inti, the sun, and the Apus. Consider for a moment the principal temple. Its walls are built of enormous, beautifully cut rectangular blocks. The most sacred spot in the temple is marked by a massive, single, monolithic rock, clearly left in situ and carved by human hands to flow seamlessly into the structure around it. This is not merely construction, it is the incorporation of the mountain itself into the liturgy. The Inca believed that the spirit of the mountain resided in the stone. Therefore, the most holy act was to reverence the stone where it lay. Even the trapezoidal geometry that dominates all Inca doorways, windows, and niches carries cosmic significance. The trapezoid, wider at the base than at the top, is inherently more stable in an earthquake zone, once again marrying engineering necessity with aesthetic form. However, this shape also reflects the mountainous terrain and perhaps symbolically the movement from the broad base of the earth up toward the narrower apex of the heavens. It provides a visual and structural lift, a constant, subtle reminder of the verticality of the Inca world. The stones, moreover, were carved to interact with the light. The Inca perfected the technique of carving blocks to create specific shadows or highlights at precise times of the day, particularly during the solstices and equinoxes. The curved wall of the Temple of the Sun, for instance, is constructed around a natural boulder and features two small, perfectly aligned trapezoidal windows. During the winter solstice, June in the southern hemisphere, the first rays of the rising sun pass directly through one of these windows, illuminating the sacred stone within the temple's inner chamber. This was not a lucky accident. It was a pre-programmed astronomical event, transforming the stone chamber into a living calendar and a moment of ritual communion between the Sapa Inca and the sun god. The concept of the huaca is key here. To the Inca, a huaca was a sacred object or place. It could be a temple, a fountain, a carving, or a mountain. Machu Picchu is, in its entirety, a colossal, interlocking system of huacas. The city is essentially a three-dimensional mandala where the architecture mirrors the cosmic order. The stones of the citadel were sourced primarily from the mountain itself, quarried in specific areas to ensure minimal structural disturbance. The task of moving these enormous blocks up the slopes speaks to an unparalleled organizational capacity. It involved hundreds, perhaps thousands of laborers, using simple ropes, levers, and ramps, a collective effort bound by ritual and common purpose. The scars of the quarrying process are still visible, offering a tangible glimpse into the immense human labor required to elevate this sacred city above the clouds. Ultimately, the cosmology of stone reveals that Machu Picchu was a place of observation and balance. The architects sought to achieve perfect equilibrium between the human creation, the finely dressed stone, and the wild divinity of nature, the raw mountain peak. By fitting their geometry so flawlessly into the rugged landscape, the Inca secured their place in the cosmic order, demonstrating a deep respect for the Pacha, the universe, and the earth that sustains it. The silence that reigns among these precision-cut walls is the echo of this ancient labor and reverence. It is the deep, profound stillness of stone that has fulfilled its sacred purpose, enduring through time.
From the profound quiet of the general city walls, we are drawn toward the most sacred and perhaps the most mysterious structure within the entire citadel, the Intihuatana. The name itself, often translated as the hitching post of the sun, suggests a mystical ambition, the belief that through flawless observation and ritual, one could tether the movement of the most powerful deity, Inti, the sun god, to the mortal earth. The Intihuatana occupies the highest point in the sacred district of the city, situated on a natural mound overlooking the main plaza. Its location is a deliberate, uncompromising statement of its purpose. It is the astronomical nucleus of Machu Picchu. To reach it, one must ascend a final series of perfectly carved steps, feeling the subtle shift in energy that accompanies entry into a primary ritual space. The structure itself is not a temple in the conventional sense, but a single, meticulously sculpted piece of granite. It is a large, irregularly shaped stone block rising from a polygonal base, carved from the bedrock of the mountain itself.
The most remarkable feature is a short, stout pillar nearly 2 feet high, whose sides are oriented with incredible precision toward the 4 cardinal directions. This stone was the ultimate Inca calendar and observatory. The Inca, masters of agricultural cycles, needed to predict the solstices and equinoxes with absolute certainty. Their life and the life of their staple crops, corn and potatoes, depended on knowing exactly when to plant and when to harvest. The Intihuatana served as their perfect perpetual clock. The precise moment of the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, occurring in June in the southern hemisphere, was arguably the most crucial ritual moment. It marked the lowest point of the sun's journey, and the Inca, fearing Inti might abandon them, performed elaborate ceremonies to petition him to return and lengthen the days. On this specific day, the rising sun would cast a perfect, deep shadow from the carved pillar. As the sun reached its zenith, the shadow would begin to retreat from the base, giving the priests and the Sapa Inca the precise time to initiate the most powerful rituals. The equinoxes, however, offer the most dramatic visual demonstration of the stone's precision. On these days, the sun passes directly over the equator. At midday, the Intihuatana pillar casts virtually no shadow whatsoever. For a brief, powerful moment, the sun seems to sit directly atop the stone, visually illustrating the name. The sun is hitched to this earthly anchor. This phenomenon would have been interpreted by the Inca not merely as an astronomical event, but as a divine affirmation of their power and their connection to Inti.
The stone is far more than a simple gnomon, a shadow-casting object. Its complex shape and the small, subtle angles carved into its base also allowed for the tracking of various celestial bodies and the calculation of other important solar events throughout the year, marking the boundaries of the complex Inca year. This profound knowledge was the exclusive domain of the priest astronomers and the Sapa Inca, reinforcing the city's role as a center of elite cosmological learning. The significance of the Intihuatana is amplified by its context. All around the stone, the surrounding mountains, the Apus, are visible and seem to participate in the observation. The entire sky dome becomes the observatory's ceiling, and the peaks serve as natural markers or giant geological pointers, framing the rise and set points of the sun throughout the year. The Inca did not need mechanical devices. Their observatory was the entire landscape. We must pause here to consider the devastating significance of this stone's destruction elsewhere in the empire. When the Spanish conquered the Inca, they systematically sought out and destroyed every known Intihuatana they could find, recognizing them as powerful huacas, sacred objects that legitimized the Inca religion. By destroying the hitching posts, they symbolically untethered the sun god from the native people, replacing him with the Christian cross. The fact that the Intihuatana at Machu Picchu remains perfectly intact is one of the clearest pieces of evidence for the city's profound secrecy and successful evasion of Spanish discovery. It is a time capsule, a physical artifact that still performs its intended function exactly as it did 5 centuries ago, unlike the shattered remnants found in other Inca sites.
Its survival is a metaphor for the survival of the Inca spirit itself in this remote sanctuary. The atmosphere around the stone is often charged, a place where many visitors report feeling a peculiar sense of energy or focus. Whether this is due to the natural magnetic properties of the granite or the centuries of focused ritual energy poured into the site, the stone serves as a powerful conduit between the human world and the celestial sphere. The ritual life of Machu Picchu, governed by this stone, was a quiet but constant rhythm. It dictated the timing of the annual festival of the sun, the Inti Raymi, which involved fasting, offerings of chicha, fermented corn beer, and intricate dances. The Sapa Inca, as the son of the sun, performed these rituals to ensure the continuity of the cosmos and the fertility of the earth. Ultimately, the Intihuatana anchors the entire script's theme of hidden mastery. It tells us that the Incas' greatest secrets were not gold or armies, but knowledge, specifically the knowledge of time, agriculture, and the sacred relationship between the sky and the stone. It confirms Machu Picchu's primary role as a place for the maintenance of cosmic order, a duty far more essential than military defense or political administration. The sun continues its slow arc across the Andean sky, guided and marked by this granite needle. Our next journey takes us from the heavens above to the vital element that runs through the veins of the city, sustaining life and ritual purity.
From the celestial anchor of the Intihuatana, our focus descends to the element that gave life, purity, and rhythm to the stone city, water. In the steep, cloud-laden environment of Machu Picchu, water is both a relentless hazard and an indispensable gift. The Incas' mastery lay not only in managing their stone, the unmoving earth, but in engineering the flow of water, the ever-moving force, to sustain both agriculture and ritual. The entire hydraulic system of the city is an astonishing demonstration of applied engineering and deep reverence. It confirms that the Inca understood that the most existential threat to a city built on such a steep, rainy slope was not invasion, but landslide. Their water management strategy, therefore, was intrinsically linked to their structural engineering, a symbiotic system designed for eternal stability. The system begins high above the citadel, at a sacred spring on the northeast slope of Machu Picchu mountain. This spring was channeled through a finely constructed headrace, an unlined, gravity-fed canal that runs for nearly half a mile, adhering to the complex, curving contours of the mountain. This canal was maintained with an incredibly gentle, consistent slope of around 3%. This precise gradient ensured a constant, manageable flow, preventing the water from rushing too fast and eroding the channel, yet ensuring it never became stagnant. The engineering was so accurate that the Inca could guarantee a consistent water supply to the heart of the city, regardless of seasonal changes or cloudbursts. The canal first delivered the water to the agricultural sector, irrigating the elaborate terrace system we discussed earlier. The multiple layers of gravel and rock beneath the terraces acted as a sophisticated French drain, not only drawing moisture deep into the soil for the crops, but also effectively routing excess rainwater away from the urban core and safely down the mountain. The entire complex functioned as a massive, self-draining watershed. From the agricultural zone, the life-giving water entered the urban sector and became part of the ritual landscape.
Here, the Inca built a remarkable series of 16 ceremonial fountains, or pachas, arranged in a stepped cascade that followed the natural gradient of the main urban hill. Each fountain was a masterpiece of stonework. The water was delivered to the highest fountain, known as the priest's bath or the fountain of the first water, before spilling through a finely cut spout into the basin below. It then cascaded through a series of stone channels, flowing sequentially down to the next basin. This system was designed for both utility and spirituality.
Utility is obvious. The fountains provided fresh, clean drinking water and bathing facilities for the inhabitants. But the spiritual significance is profound. The water system itself was a huaca, a sacred object. The ritual flow of the water mirrored the descent of the celestial river, the Milky Way, and the life-giving power of Urpilay Chakui, the Inca's representation of clean, flowing water. The highest fountains, due to their proximity to the spring, were reserved for the elite, the Sapa Inca and the priests, for ritual purification before astronomical observations or temple ceremonies. The slow, controlled descent of the water symbolized the order and hierarchy of the cosmos, moving from the sacred, elevated source down to the public, sustaining the entire community as it flowed. The sound of the running water, a gentle rhythmic splash, replacing the roaring of the Urubamba far below, provided an essential auditory element to the city's quiet, contemplative atmosphere. Beneath the visible fountains, the Inca integrated an equally complex drainage network. The city receives over 75 inches of rain annually. To prevent the plazas and foundations from turning into mudslides, every section of the city was crosshatched with subterranean drains. These drains, constructed of fitted stone and running beneath the main walkways and plazas, directed rainwater off the slopes. It is estimated that there are over 130 drainage holes piercing the main retaining walls alone, each strategically positioned to shed water and reduce pressure on the hillside. This deep respect for water management underscores the long-term thinking of the Inca civilization. They viewed their work not for a single generation, but for eternity. By controlling the flow of erosion, they secured the permanence of the stone. The survival of Machu Picchu for nearly half a millennium, battered by mountain storms and ceaseless altitude rain, is perhaps the ultimate tribute to their hydrological genius. The cult of the water reminds us that in this sacred city, the most mundane engineering tasks were imbued with divine meaning. Securing the water supply was securing the purity and longevity of the cosmic experiment that was Machu Picchu. The water, channeled through stone, served as a daily, tangible reminder of the divine forces that governed their lives. We now follow the water as it plunges down from Machu Picchu, leading us away from the sacred, silent architecture of the citadel and toward the monumental, mobile architecture of the wider Inca Empire. The secret of the lost city's sustained isolation was not its height alone, but its place within a network, the Capac Ñan,
that could be quickly constructed, utilized, and then, if necessary, deliberately dismantled. The most astonishing and essential element of this network was the Inca rope bridge, a structure of profound engineering genius and profound symbolic power. This section focuses on the epitome of this genius, the Quechua-Chaca, pronounced Quechua-Chaca. This is not a relic of stone, but a living tradition. It is the last remaining hand-woven grass bridge in the world, maintained and rebuilt annually by 4 local Quechua communities in the Cusco region of Peru. Its lore is passed down through action, not simply words. To understand the genius of the Inca bridge is to understand the geography of the Andes. The great mountain chain is defined by immense, sheer-sided gorges, often carved by the turbulent, non-navigable rivers like the Apurimac or the Urubamba. The distance across the top might be just a few hundred feet, but the vertical drop is hundreds, sometimes thousands of feet. Stone arch bridges were impossible. Even a deep, strong timber foundation was impractical. The solution required a material that was flexible, abundant, and renewable: ichu grass, Stipa ichu. The bridges, chuca or chaca, were not merely crossings, they were vital infrastructure for an empire of 10 million people spanning thousands of miles. They allowed the rapid transit of the chasqui runners, the movement of military forces, and the centralized collection of tribute and goods. They were the keys to political cohesion and administrative control. The annual ritual of rebuilding the Quechua-Chaca is a microcosm of the Inca principles of Aini and Mita. The work is undertaken every June after the harvest and takes 3 days. It is a massive, coordinated effort involving hundreds of participants from the 4 communities: Huinchiri, Chaupibanda, Collana, Quebe, and Percaro. The ritual of renewal. The first day. The process begins with the collection and preparation of the coya, the main material. For weeks, the women of the communities harvest the ichu grass, dampen it, and then beat it until it is soft and malleable. The first day of the ritual is dedicated entirely to twining the strands. The women braid the individual small ropes of ichu fiber. The men then take these small braids and twist them together using powerful foot-powered spinning motions, forming thick, cable-sized ropes. The rhythmic, communal labor is steeped in ceremony, overseen by a Paco, an Andean priest who performs rituals and offerings to the Apus to ensure strength and safety. This intensive labor is not just technical, it is spiritual fortification. The belief is that the strength of the bridge depends on the strength of the community's shared devotion.
The second day is the day of structural engineering. The 6 main cables, 3 for the walkway and 2 for the handrails, plus an auxiliary rope, are painstakingly hauled across the gorge. The ropes are thick, each cable now consisting of dozens of braided kuya ropes twisted into a single massive diameter. The tension is immense, and the anchoring is the most critical and permanent part of the structure. The ropes are lashed securely to huge, permanent stone anchor blocks on both sides of the canyon. These anchors are centuries old, placed strategically into the bedrock by the original Inca engineers. This anchoring system, utilizing the deep, immovable strength of the mountain, is what transfers the incredible forces of the bridge's load and sway into the living rock. Once the new cables are secured, the old bridge is cut and dropped into the river below. This act is profoundly symbolic. Renewal requires complete severance from the past. The dropping of the old cables is an offering to the river spirit, and it cleanses the structure, allowing the new bridge to start fresh. The walkway and the completion. The third day. The final day involves weaving the new cables together. The 3 floor cables are bound by transversal sticks and tied down with smaller braided ichu ropes to create the walkable surface. The 2 handrails are tied to the floor cables using the same smaller ropes, creating the 3-dimensional load-distributing structure. The whole process requires immense physical coordination, with men hanging below the structure, working the ropes into tension and knotting the cross members. The finished Queswachaka is a marvel of flexible suspension engineering. The bridge is designed to sway. Unlike modern steel bridges built for rigid stability, the natural fibers of ichu grass are strongest when they are allowed to move with the wind and the load. This innate flexibility makes the structure incredibly resilient to the constant vibrations of the Andean environment. The bridge is a living embodiment of the secret of Inca longevity, adaptability. It is designed to degrade. The ichu grass will break down over a year, but its knowledge is designed to endure, renewed by the community before collapse. The rope bridge, built of fragile materials, is in fact the most permanent element of the Inca infrastructure because its renewal is built into its very existence. The lore tells us that these bridges were guarded jealously, especially during the wars of resistance in Vilcabamba. The ability to swiftly cut the anchors and let the bridge fall into the gorge was the ultimate strategic defense, instantly creating an impassable barrier that could not be breached by Spanish cavalry or foot soldiers. The rope bridge, therefore, was not just an engineering feat. It was the guardian of the empire's secrets, including the existence and the route to places like Machu Picchu.
We turn now to a deeper, more technical exploration of the rope bridges, moving beyond the ritual of their renewal to the pure engineering genius that allowed these structures, made of simple grass, to survive the extremes of the Andean climate and the relentless forces of nature. This is the engineering of survival, a profound testament to the Inca's material science and structural intuition. The fundamental secret lies in the choice of material, ichu grass, or Stipa ichu, a tough, fibrous perennial that grows abundantly on the high plateaus, the altiplano. Unlike hemp or cotton, which were not as easily cultivated in the high Andes, ichu was universally available. It is naturally resistant to decay when properly treated, and crucially, it is extremely lightweight, yet possesses exceptional tensile strength when bundled and tightly twisted. To maximize this strength, the Inca developed a process that was part pre-treatment and part ritual. The grass was wetted and hammered to break down the cellular structure, making the fibers pliable. It was then dried and braided into fine cords, which were subsequently twisted into the larger structural cables, the coya. The twisting motion, often performed by groups of men and women, created an internal stress within the cable, tightening the fibers and significantly increasing the load-bearing capacity. The process of making one major cable for a long bridge could take weeks of concentrated communal effort. Consider the dimensions of these vital components. A major Inca bridge, like the historic crossings over the Apurimac River, could span distances well over 150 feet. The main floor cables of such a bridge were immense, often reaching the thickness of a man's torso. The typical structure comprised 6 primary cables, 3 for the floor and 3 for the guardrails. Diagram illustrating the construction principles of an Inca rope bridge, showing the main cables, floor ropes, handrails, and the transversal wood planks used for bracing. The structural stability of the bridge relied on 2 main principles. Distributed load. The 3 cables forming the floor were not designed to hold weight independently. They were woven together with transverse ties, ensuring that the load was shared across the entire bundle. If one fiber or even a whole small braid snapped, the structural integrity of the whole cable remained intact due to the redundancy built into the system. Flexible suspension. Modern suspension bridges are often made of steel, engineered for rigidity and minimal movement. The Inca bridge was engineered for maximum flexibility. The natural fibers allowed the bridge to sway and damp the powerful forces of the wind and the constant seismic tremors of the Andes. A rigid rope bridge would snap under these forces. The flexible, braided structure absorbed the energy, distributing it harmlessly along the length of the cables. This was the epitome of designing with nature rather than against it. The anchorage system perhaps was the most enduring part of the design. On either side of the gorge, massive stone abutments, permanent installations carved directly into the bedrock, were constructed. The main cables were looped around these abutments multiple times and secured with smaller, specialized stone-secured anchors. This ensured that the tensile force of the tightly drawn cables was borne by the immovable mountain itself. Unlike the grass cables, which had a lifespan of about 1 year before weakening due to moisture and exposure, these stone anchors were intended to last forever.
Furthermore, the geometry of the crossing was subtly controlled. The Inca often chose sites where the gorge narrowed, allowing for the shortest possible span, but also where the cliff faces were nearly vertical. providing strong natural anchor points. The resulting bridges naturally possessed a degree of catenary curve, the gentle downward arc of a suspension cable, which distributes the weight efficiently. The maintenance cycle was not a failure of engineering, but a deliberate part of it. The annual rebuilding ritual of the Huayhuachaca, which we detailed earlier, was an act of practical necessity. The high humidity and exposure to sun and rain would cause the grass fibers to degrade within 12 to 18 months, leading to a loss of tensile strength. By making the bridge replacement a mandatory annual mita, public service obligation, carried out by the local communities, the Inca ensured that the entire empire's road system was perpetually refreshed and maintained to the highest safety standard. This bureaucratic efficiency, enforced through ritual, was as important as the physics of the ropes. The sheer volume of material required speaks to the scale of the operation. For a single major bridge, thousands of pounds of ichu grass were harvested, spun and braided. This required vast resources of communal labor and logistical organization, confirming that the maintenance of the rope bridges was a strategic priority of the highest order for the Sapa Inca's administration. In a civilization that lacked wheeled vehicles, sophisticated pulleys, or iron tools, the rope bridge stood as the paramount achievement of their civil engineering. It was a structure of survival, designed to carry the weight of an entire empire's communication and logistics over terrifying voids. The resilience of the rope bridge stands in direct contrast to the rigidity of the stone city. Machu Picchu is a monument to permanence, designed to be eternal in one place. The rope bridges are monuments to perpetual renewal, designed to be temporary in their materials, but eternal in their function and the knowledge required to rebuild them. Both, in their own way, define the mastery of the Inca over the Andean world. We now shift our gaze from the immobile engineering of the rope bridge to the human energy that traversed it, the Chasqui runners. If the Capac Ñan Inca road system was the empire's skeletal structure, and the rope bridges were its flexible, vital joints, then the Chasqui were the nervous system, the means by which information and control flowed across an empire that stretched over 2,500 miles of brutally complex terrain. In the vast expanse of the Andes, where mountains separated every province and where the Sapa Inca in Cusco needed to govern territories ranging from the coastal deserts to the high Amazonian slopes, rapid communication was paramount. The Inca achieved this not through the invention of the wheel or the horse, but through the unparalleled physical prowess and disciplined organization of their relay runners. The Chasqui were highly selected, incredibly fit young men, trained from boyhood in endurance, navigation, and loyalty. Their role was a position of great trust and honor within the Inca societal structure. Their speed was legendary. It is estimated that the relay system could transmit messages up to 150 miles per day, a speed that rivaled the fastest European communication methods of the time, often far exceeding them in difficult terrain. The network operated as a highly efficient, militarized relay system. The key to its speed was not continuous running by a single individual, but the strategic placement of tampu, rest houses or way stations. The logistics of the relay. Tampu placement. These small, standardized stone structures were placed at intervals of approximately 6 to 9 miles, about 12 to 18 kilometers, along the length of the Capac Ñan. They served as barracks, supply depots, and relay points. The run. A Chasqui would run this short distance, often at near sprint pace, before reaching the next tampu.
As he approached, he would blow a distinct note on a pututu, a trumpet made from a conch shell, to alert the waiting runner. The transfer of the message was instantaneous. The incoming runner would deliver two critical pieces of information. The quipu, the main message, a complex system of colored knotted strings that recorded numerical and sometimes narrative data, discussed in detail later. And the oral message, a verbal confirmation or supplementary instruction that could not be recorded in the quipu. This system minimized the time each chasqui spent carrying the message, allowing them to run their segment at maximum speed and minimizing the effects of altitude and fatigue. It was an optimized, high-altitude logistics chain, dependent entirely on the perfectly maintained road network, which included the rope bridges. The bridge as a choke point. For the chasqui, the rope bridges were the most crucial and often the most terrifying part of their route. Imagine a runner, exhausted but energized by the urgency of his mission, arriving at the precipice of a gorge. He must cross a swaying, humming structure made of woven grass, suspended hundreds of feet above a roaring river. This required absolute faith in the engineering, in the community effort of the Mita that built it, and in his own physical composure. The bridge was a test of courage as much as a path of transit. It is during these crossings that the speed of the chasqui was most critical. He could not falter, the message could not be delayed. The fragility of the bridge contrasted sharply with the massive power it wielded. A single, thin walkway of grass was the sole connection between two immense solid mountains, and thus between two vital parts of the empire. The cargo of the chasqui. The messages the chasqui carried were varied, complex, and vital. Imperial commands, decrees from the Sapa Inca, tax collection demands, and census data recorded on the quipu. Military intelligence, reports on provincial unrest, border incursions, and troop movements. Perishable goods. In a testament to their speed, the chasqui were also used to transport light, high-value, perishable goods, such as fresh fish from the Pacific coast to the Sapa Inca's table in Cusco, or tropical fruits from the lowlands. A journey of hundreds of miles completed in approximately 2 days. This feat demonstrated the phenomenal logistical power of the road and relay system. The lore of the chasqui reinforces the central theme of this script, that the Inca's greatest achievements were founded on organization, efficiency, and a profound respect for human endurance. They adapted their organizational structures to conquer the overwhelming verticality of their geography. The speed of the runner, facilitated by the strength of the bridge, was the engine of imperial unity. The chasqui ensured that even in the remote sanctuary of Machu Picchu, the royal inhabitants were never truly cut off from the knowledge and resources of the vast empire stretching around them. The path was always open, provided the bridges held fast.
The vast Capac Ñan and its breathtaking rope bridges were not merely logistical routes for fish and messages. They were also the sacred stage for the movement of the most important person in the Andean world, the Sapa Inca, the divine ruler, the son of the sun. To understand the Sapa Inca's transit is to understand the ultimate symbolic and political power embedded in the empire's infrastructure, particularly the rope bridges. The Sapa Inca rarely walked. His journeys across the immense empire were epic, highly ritualized events designed to reinforce his divine status and project his absolute authority over the landscape and the people. When the emperor traveled, he was carried on a magnificent litter, a highly adorned portable throne by a team of elite, trusted carriers. His procession
which could involve thousands of retainers, engineers, priests, and military guards, moved with majestic slowness, transforming the roads into ceremonial avenues. The rope bridges, however, presented a unique challenge to this majestic progress. These flexible structures, designed to sway and hum with the energy of the void, were deeply unsettling to the uninitiated. For the Sapa Inca, the crossing of a major gorge via a grass bridge was not just a physical act, it was a profound spiritual and political statement. The bridge as a symbol of divine authority. The act of the Sapa Inca being carried safely across the swaying chasm demonstrated his mastery over chaos. The bridge, made of fragile natural material, represented the fragility of life and the terrifying power of the Apus and river spirits. By commissioning and then safely traversing the structure, the Inca affirmed that his power, derived directly from Inti, was sufficient to command the stability of the earth itself. His safe passage was a blessing and an assurance of cosmic order for all his subjects. Furthermore, the construction of these immense bridges often involved rituals to propitiate the mountain and river gods. Sacrifices, sometimes human, were historically recorded as being performed before and after the building of the most challenging spans to ensure the huaca, the sacred energy of the bridge, was powerful enough to carry the divine king. The approach to the bridge was typically marked by a specialized architectural feature, the ushnu. While ushnus were often centralized platforms in plazas used for public rituals, versions of them were also found near major transportation hubs, including bridges. These were elevated, precisely shaped stone platforms where the Sapa Inca could pause, perform a small ceremony, and acknowledge the Apus before committing to the crossing. The ushnu served as a sacred staging ground, transforming the precarious journey into a controlled ritual moment.
The control over the rope bridges also represented absolute geopolitical power. The empire understood that control of the Chaka meant control of all movement. Should a rebellion break out, the first strategic move was to secure or destroy the bridge. For the Sapa Inca, the bridge was also a demonstration of his administration's ability to command mita labor across diverse and distant communities, maintaining a crucial piece of infrastructure that benefited everyone but was fundamentally an extension of his will. The rope bridge, in its perpetual cycle of destruction and renewal, symbolized the enduring and cyclical nature of Inca imperial power. The king might pass, but the road and the means to traverse the void would always be rebuilt. It is worth considering the context of Machu Picchu within this system. The city, being a royal estate, relied on these exact bridges to maintain its secrecy and its provisioning. While the Sapa Inca may not have traveled to Machu Picchu frequently, his eventual sacred transit, carried high above the Urubamba, would have been the ultimate ritual confirmation of the citadel's spiritual importance. The bridges made the retreat possible, and the Chasqui runners made the isolation viable. The memory of the Sapa Inca's transit
lingers on the great roads, a testament to an empire that mastered both the heavy permanence of stone and the light, flexible strength of woven grass. The entire system, the roads, the runners, and the bridges, was orchestrated to facilitate and glorify the movement of the divine emperor.
Returning to the embrace of the citadel, we now focus on the structure that made life possible in this sacred altitude, the terrace system, known to the Inca as andenes. These vast stepped formations, seen by some merely as fields, are in reality the most complex and critical element of the Incas' self-sufficiency and their profound mastery over a defiant geography. If the Intihuatana governed time, the terraces governed survival. At Machu Picchu, the terraces cover nearly the entire accessible slope surrounding the urban core. They are a definitive statement that the purpose of the city was not solely ritualistic, but also inherently sustainable. A city of priests, astronomers, and royalty could not survive without a massive, consistent food supply. And that supply had to be generated in situ, guarding the city's secrecy. The sheer scale of the engineering required to create these andenes is difficult to overstate. The Inca did not simply carve into the hillside. They constructed new, layered segments of arable land. The typical structure of an Inca terrace wall is a masterpiece of material science and hydrostatic management, perfectly illustrating the engineering of survival we discussed earlier. The retaining wall, built with dry stacked field stones, often polygonal and without mortar, these walls are thick, strong, and crucially, slightly sloped inward. This inward lean counters the tremendous outward pressure exerted by the soil and water held behind the wall, preventing slippage down the steep slope. The dry stacked construction ensures the wall is permeable, allowing water to seep through slowly rather than build up pressure. The foundation layers. Behind the visible wall, the Inca constructed a multi-layered drain and foundation system designed to manage water from the torrential Andean rains. The lowest layer consists of large stones or boulders for basic support and maximum drainage. Above this are layers of gravel and crushed rock, which act as a filter. The arable soil. The top layer, sometimes up to a meter deep, is the fertile topsoil, often imported or carefully composted, designed for optimal crop growth. This intricate layered structure performs three essential functions simultaneously. Slope stabilization. The terraces act as massive interlocking buttresses, dramatically reducing erosion and preventing landslides on the incredibly steep mountain face. Water management. The layers provide sophisticated drainage, ensuring that heavy rains are absorbed and released slowly, preventing flooding and maintaining consistent soil moisture. Microclimate creation. This is perhaps the most subtle and brilliant aspect. The stone walls, particularly the lower ones, absorb solar radiation during the day and slowly radiate that heat back out during the cold Andean nights. This raises the ambient temperature near the crops by several degrees, effectively creating microclimates on different terrace levels. This ability to manipulate temperature allowed the Inca to grow crops at an altitude that would otherwise be impossible. They could cultivate staple foods like maize, corn, a crop demanding warmer temperatures on lower terraces,
while reserving the hardy, higher, colder terraces for hardy, altitude-resistant tubers like the thousands of varieties of potato, papa. The moray analogy and agricultural research. While Machu Picchu's terraces were primarily functional for food production, their sheer scale and complexity lead scholars to suggest the site, along with other specialized centers like moray, served as an agricultural research station. The Inca were deeply concerned with crop improvement and acclimatization. The distinct temperature bands created by the terraces would have allowed priests and agronomists to test which crops thrived best at specific temperatures and humidities, effectively creating a high-altitude natural laboratory. The efficiency of the terrace system allowed Machu Picchu to be fully self-sufficient, a crucial factor in maintaining the veil of secrecy during the decades of resistance. It allowed a high-density, specialized population to sustain itself without having to rely on constant food transport from the vulnerable valleys below, thereby reducing the chances of attracting Spanish attention. The Andenes are a profound example of the Inca principle of sustained harmony. They are not an imposition upon the mountain, but a sophisticated dialogue with it. By mastering the earth's slope and the sun's warmth, the Inca created a perpetual harvest, ensuring the longevity of their sacred sanctuary. The silent stone walls of the terraces are not simply walls of support. They are walls of endurance and ingenuity.
Our gaze is naturally drawn upward from the perfectly engineered terraces and the ordered stone of the citadel to the monumental backdrop that defines Machu Picchu's identity, Huayna Picchu, the young peak. This towering conical mountain, often seen in iconic photographs, is far more than a scenic vista. It is a guardian, a sacred Apu that completes the cosmic geometry of the sanctuary. The sheer difficulty of accessing Huayna Picchu underscores its exclusive ritualistic function. The ascent is extremely steep, following a precarious Inca trail that often consists of steps carved directly into the rock face, sometimes utilizing cables for assistance. This climb was not for the masses, it was reserved for the elite, likely the priest astronomers or the most revered Akya, chosen women whose duties included specialized observation and ritual. The peak itself is far from barren. Despite the intimidating gradient, the Inca engineers extended their architectural genius here, crafting specialized structures that seem to cling impossibly to the cliff edge. This ability to build in places that defy modern construction standards speaks volumes about their confidence and skill. The Temple of the Moon. Midway down the northern face of Huayna Picchu, in a remote and deeply spiritual location, lies the Temple of the Moon, also called the Great Cave. This site is not a conventional structure, but a complex of fine stonework built around and within a natural cavern. This deliberate use of the natural earth is a profound expression of Inca spirituality. Inca cosmology viewed caves, pacarinas, as places of origin, points where ancestors emerged from the earth, and as portals to the Uku Pacha, the inner or underworld. The Temple of the Moon, with its finely carved niches, stone benches, and high-quality ashlar masonry, was almost certainly used for esoteric, nocturnal rituals. The smooth, dark stone surfaces inside the cave may have been used for reflections or possibly astronomical observations focused on the moon, stars, or the shadowy constellations of the Milky Way, which the Inca revered. The location emphasizes the Inca concept of dualism and balance. Machu Picchu proper, with the Intihuatana, is dedicated to the sun, Inti, and the heavens, Hananpacha. The Temple of the Moon, hidden deep on the face of its guardian peak, is dedicated to the feminine energies, the darkness, and the earth's depths, Ukupacha. The entire valley forms a sacred center, where the light and dark aspects of the cosmos are celebrated in architectural form. The Summit Outpost. At the very summit of Huayna Picchu, the views are expansive, confirming the peak's strategic importance, though its primary function remained ritual. Here, the Inca constructed a small, tightly fit observation post, or possibly a small ceremonial hut. The importance of the summit is twofold. Astronomical vistas. From this elevated position, the horizon is clear, offering unparalleled sight lines for tracking specific star movements or the distant rise and set points of the sun relative to the far-off Apus. Topographic command. The summit provided a commanding view of the entire Urubamba Canyon, allowing for the observation of any movement in the valley. It was a perfect strategic lookout, ensuring the security and, more importantly, the secrecy of the citadel below. The entire peak of Huayna Picchu was thus engineered to serve the ritual and defensive needs of Machu Picchu. The presence of tiny, perfectly built terraces, andenes, on the dizzying slopes of Huayna Picchu further demonstrates the Incas' commitment to maximizing every inch of sacred land, reinforcing the spiritual necessity of their labor. The very form of Huayna Picchu, with its dramatic, upward-thrusting shape, made it a prime Apu, a mountain deemed naturally sacred. The Inca did not just build a city next to it. They built the city in conversation with it, allowing the natural deity to define the shape and purpose of the human creation. The peak stands as a perpetual silent guardian, its stone steps a final rigorous test of devotion for those seeking the deepest spiritual truths within the sanctuary. The guardian peak completes the city's composition, elevating it from a mere settlement to a cosmic altar nestled between the old peak, Machu Picchu Mountain, and the young peak, Huayna Picchu, with the human world built in harmonious balance between the two.
The silent stone city was not solely occupied by priests and astronomers. Its vitality, its internal rhythm, and the richness of its rituals were sustained by a specialized, sacred population, primarily the Akla, the chosen women. Our attention now turns to the Aklawasi, House of the Chosen, the residential and working quarters where these women lived a sequestered life of immense spiritual and practical importance. In the structure of Machu Picchu, the residential district reveals several compounds that, based on archaeological evidence and historical comparison with other Inca sites, served as the Aklawasi. These areas were often characterized by smaller, more intimate courtyards, smaller rooms arranged around common spaces, and often featuring the highest quality textiles and artifacts. The Akla were selected from across the empire, primarily before the age of 10, based on their beauty, talent, and lineage. They were removed from their original homes and consecrated to the service of the Sapa Inca and the sun god Inti. Their life was one of perpetual dedication, a spiritual seclusion often compared to a convent, though their roles were far more diverse and central to the functioning of the state. The functions of the Akla. The chosen women performed three primary, indispensable functions that sustained both the spiritual and material needs of the empire's elite. Ritual production, weaving. This was their highest duty. The Akla were the empire's master weavers, producing the finest textiles, gompi or kumbi. Cloth in the Inca Empire was a form of wealth, tribute, and political power, often more valuable than gold. The finest fabrics, woven from vicuña wool, were reserved exclusively for the Sapa Inca and for ceremonial offerings, including burning them as sacred sacrifices to the sun. Their meticulous, silent work ensured that the spiritual authority of the Inca was visibly maintained through material luxury. Ceremonial brewing, chicha. The Akla were also responsible for brewing the sacred chicha, fermented corn beer. This beverage was indispensable for every major Inca ritual, festival, and political gathering. The chicha brewed by the Akla was considered the purest and most potent form, sanctified by their devotion. Their careful rhythmic preparation of the corn mash and fermentation process was itself a silent ritual, binding the community to the cosmos through the consumption of the sacred drink. Wifely and religious service. A number of the Akla were eventually given as wives to the Sapa Inca, to nobles or to military leaders as a reward for service. Others remained dedicated to the temples throughout their lives, acting as priestesses, mamaconas, assisting in the astronomical observations and ceremonial duties of the citadel. The quiet, ordered life within the Aklawasi of Machu Picchu would have been a stark contrast to the rougher, exterior world of the road builders and the soldiers. It was a space of refined labor and profound stillness, mirroring the architectural precision of the temples they served. The lore of the women of Machu Picchu. Early excavations at Machu Picchu, particularly the analysis of skeletal remains by Hiram Bingham and his team, led to an initial sensationalized misinterpretation. Based on the relatively small and gracile nature of the 174 skeletons recovered, an American anthropologist initially concluded that the vast majority were female, suggesting the city was a sanctuary of the Virgins of the Sun, an exclusively female sacred refuge. Later, more advanced osteological analysis refuted this claim, demonstrating that the remains were roughly equally split between men and women, with the small stature being typical of the high-altitude Andean people. However, the initial lore of the Virgins of the Sun has persisted in the popular imagination, underscoring the site's unique contemplative atmosphere and its strong association with female spiritual labor. What the skeletons do confirm is the presence of a diverse population, but one that was likely non-local, drawn from various regions of the empire. This mixture of DNA suggests that the inhabitants of Machu Picchu were indeed an elite, hand-selected group of retainers, craftsmen, and priests brought to the royal estate from all four suyus, quarters of the empire,
reinforcing the city's status as a centralized sacred hub. The silent rooms of the Aklawasi, with their perfectly carved niches designed to hold ritual items and weaving tools, speak of a life defined by purity, discipline, and skilled production. Their presence was integral to the operation of Machu Picchu as a cosmic city, ensuring that the Sapa Inca, the son of the sun, was perpetually served with the finest threads and the most sacred drinks, maintaining the divine link between the mountain sanctuary and the heavens.
Every great city-state eventually yields to time, but the silence that fell upon Machu Picchu is one of history's most profound and enduring enigmas. The city was not conquered. It was not besieged. It was simply abandoned. This section explores the theories surrounding the final days of the sanctuary and the mystery of its quiet, calculated retreat. The historical record is clear. When the Spanish eventually found and destroyed the last Inca capital of Vilcabamba in 1572, they made no mention of Machu Picchu. The very act of the city's successful evasion of discovery for over 3.5 centuries is the core of its haunting lore. The archaeological evidence strongly suggests that Machu Picchu was never attacked by the Spanish. No signs of fire, destruction, or hastily buried valuables. The high-quality stonework remains intact. The tools were not abandoned mid-work, and the skeletons recovered show no signs of violent trauma typical of warfare. Orderly departure, artifacts and structures suggest an orderly, ritualistic departure. The ceramic vessels, tools, and even the sacred stones were left as if the inhabitants intended to return, or perhaps as if they ritually handed the entire city back to the mountains. The leading theories for this quiet, voluntary abandonment center around the systemic collapse of the Inca Empire that occurred in the decades following the initial conquest of 1532. The plague and the demographic collapse. The most devastating weapon carried by the Europeans was not steel, but disease. Smallpox and other European pathogens raced ahead of the conquistadors, killing perhaps up to 90% of the native population. This demographic catastrophe preceded the conquest and had already thrown the empire into chaos. It is highly probable that disease, carried by survivors fleeing the lowlands or even by the Chusky runners, reached the isolated heights of Machu Picchu. While the altitude might have afforded some protection, the concentration of the elite and their retinue, the priests, the Akya, and the servants, made them vulnerable. A lethal outbreak of smallpox could have decimated the specialized population necessary to maintain the complex rituals, astronomy, and agricultural systems. The death of key priests or the Sapa Inca's most essential retainers would have been a direct threat to the city's cosmic purpose. The collapse of imperial logistics. Machu Picchu, despite its self-sufficient terraces, was part of a centralized imperial system. It required constant resupply of specialized goods, coca, fine metals, specialized wool, and, crucially, mita labor. The annual commitment of specialized workers from distant regions to maintain the city's infrastructure and the vital rope bridges, as discussed in Part 8, would have ceased. The food cycle. While the terraces provided basics, the elite lifestyle required variety and tribute. The disruption of the vast Kwapak Nyan network meant the city was truly isolated, making long-term sustainability for a non-farming elite impossible. The city,
No longer able to sustain its function as a royal estate or sacred retreat due to a lack of people and resources, was no longer viable. Ritual handover and sacred secrecy. The most compelling theory suggests a calculated, ritualistic abandonment. As the Inca remnant retreated further into the Vilcabamba jungles, they had a strong motivation to keep the location of this profoundly sacred city secret from the Spanish. Machu Picchu was not a military base. It was a sanctuary of the highest order, built by the revered founder Pachacuti. To save its sacred essence from profanation by the invaders, who would undoubtedly have shattered the Intihuatana and built a church on the Temple of the Sun, the remaining Inca elite may have consciously decided to sacrifice its existence for its memory. The last remaining inhabitants, perhaps a few priests and Akya, who performed a final purification ritual, may have sealed the site and sworn the local farmers to silence. By allowing the jungle to reclaim the city, they effectively rendered it invisible to the Spanish. The stone structures were returned to the Apus, from whence they came, completing a cycle of cosmic reciprocity, or Aini. The city was abandoned to preserve its sacred status. Thus, the final days of Machu Picchu were characterized not by the roar of cannons, but by a deepening, profound silence. The mist, which had always hidden the city, was allowed to become its permanent shroud. The terraces were claimed by the wild, and the finely cut stones were laced with the tenacious roots of the cloud forest. The true secret of the lost city is that it was not lost to the Inca. It was intentionally hidden. Its lore is that of a successful evasion, a testament to the fact that the human spirit, when facing total defeat, can choose to bury its most sacred achievements, ensuring that their memory and their integrity endures.
The survival of Machu Picchu as a secret refuge relied on the sophisticated logistical control of the Inca Empire. But how did an empire of that size, spanning diverse climates and immense distances, manage its census data, tribute counts, and stores of grain without a system of writing akin to our own alphabet? The answer lies in the greatest intellectual achievement of the Inca, the Quipu, or Quipu, or the language of the knot. The Quipu is a physical manifestation of information, consisting of a main horizontal cord from which numerous pendant and secondary strings hang. It is not a decorative item. It is a meticulously crafted device for record-keeping and communication. The mastery of the Quipu was as vital to the empire as the construction of the rope bridges, for it allowed the Sapa Inca to govern from afar and understand the intricate workings of his realm. The anatomy of information. To the untrained eye, a quipu appears as a cluster of knotted ropes. To the quipu kamayoks, or the keepers and readers of the knots, it was a dense, complex database. The information encoded in a quipu was determined by several key features. Cord material and color. The cords were typically made from cotton or camelid fiber, llama or alpaca wool. The color of the string was often used to categorize the data. For instance, a red cord might signify military census, yellow for gold, white for silver, and brown for agricultural produce like potatoes or beans. Knot type. The type of knot determined the numerical value.
The Inca used a decimal or base 10 system, where the position of the knot along the pendant string represented a specific power of 10, ones, tens, hundreds, etc. Simple long knots, used for the values 2 through 9 in the ones place. Figure 8 knots, used specifically for the value of 1. Short knots or splices, used for the tens, hundreds, and thousands places. The absence of a knot signified 0, a crucial concept for accurate accounting. Twist and placement. The direction of the ply or twist of the fiber and the way the pendant strings were attached to the main cord could also hold supplementary information, further enriching the coded data. Encoding numerical and narrative data. The primary function of the quipu was accounting and statistics. A quipu might record the population of a province, the amount of maize stored in a granary, the number of soldiers available, or the total amount of tribute collected. It was a perfectly designed, non-written ledger system that allowed for administrative precision across a non-literate bureaucracy. However, the question of whether the quipu also encoded narrative or historical data, a kind of three-dimensional writing, remains one of the great open questions in Andean archaeology. Many scholars believe the complexity and redundancy in some quipus, where the color and knot placement seemed to exceed the needs of simple arithmetic, suggest they may have recorded epic poems, legal codes, or dynastic histories. If so, this would make the quipu one of the most unique and intricate forms of human communication ever devised. The Quipuquamayocs, the only people trained to read and create these complex records, were essential state functionaries. They were highly respected and acted as the living memory and calculating minds of the empire. They had to possess a perfect recall of the oral narrative that accompanied each quipu. The knots provided the numbers, the quantitative facts, while the Quipuquamayok provided the context, the qualitative story. Quipu and the secrets of Machu Picchu. The quipu system was directly relevant to the secrecy and operation of Machu Picchu. Logistical trace. Quipus would have been used to track the movement of the specialized workers and elite akla into the sequestered valley, to record the stores of chicha and fine cloth produced there, and to account for the harvest from the meticulously maintained terraces. Sealed information. When the city was ritually abandoned, the quipus that recorded its operational details were likely either taken to the Vilcabamba refuge or destroyed. The fact that the Spanish failed to capture the Quipuquamayocs or seize their records in this particular region ensured that the specific census, personnel, and production data of Machu Picchu, which might have led the Spanish to the site, remained hidden. The knots were unreadable to the invaders, serving as an effective encryption of the city's presence. The quipu represents a profound lesson that highly advanced civilization and complex government do not require an alphabetic script. They require organizational genius and a system of information that is perfectly adapted to the logistical and cultural needs of the people. The silent, hanging threads of the quipu, like the enduring stones of the citadel, are a testament to the Inca's unique intellect, binding their scattered empire together with the language of the knot.
The focus on Machu Picchu is inevitably drawn to the majestic stonework rising toward the sky, the temples of the sun and the terraces of the light. Yet the full cosmology of the Inca demanded equal reverence for the earth's depths. We must now descend into the subterranean world of the citadel, exploring the caves, tunnels, and hidden passages that connect the structures to the Ucupacha, the inner realm. In Inca belief, the earth was alive, and caves, machai or pacarina, held a sacred significance far exceeding their function as simple shelters. They were viewed as the wombs of the earth, the places where the ancestors emerged into the world, and the portals of return to the afterlife. The veneration of these natural geological formations was integrated directly into the architecture of Machu Picchu. The Great Cavern and Ritual Chambers. The most prominent example of this subterranean reverence is found beneath the royal sector and the Temple of the Sun. Below the magnificent semicircular Temple of the Sun is a natural fissure or cavern which the Inca meticulously lined and shaped with their finest stone masonry. This site is often referred to as the Royal Tomb or Cave of the Condor. This subterranean chamber features several large, finely cut niches. While no royal remains were definitively found here, leading to debate over its specific use as a tomb, the quality of the stonework and the location directly beneath the Sun Temple indicate it was a place of supreme ritual importance. Ritual of descent. The access point to this cave requires a conscious descent, a symbolic movement from the light-drenched world of the living, Hananpacha, and the Sun Temple, down into the darkness of the earth. This journey would have been central to rituals concerning the dead or invoking the ancestors, binding the Sapa Inca's divine lineage to the eternal cycle of the earth. The stone niche. The perfectly carved niches within the cave were likely used to hold mummies of important individuals, the malki, or significant ritual offerings, allowing the living to communicate with the ancestors in a protected, sacred space. The cave itself becomes the architectural manifestation of a pacarina. Tunnels and hidden passages. While much of the archaeological focus has been on the clearing of the visible city, explorations have revealed a network of subterranean channels and small tunnels. These were not primarily for defense, but for functional and ritual connection. Drainage and structure. Many tunnels are extensions of the elaborate water management system, as discussed in Part 6. These functional channels show the deep level of integration between their water, earth, stone engineering. Ritual access. Other, smaller, often barely accessible passages may have connected key temples or residences, allowing priests or royalty to move discreetly between ritual sites. The lore of the city certainly hints at secret caches or hidden escape routes, though solid evidence for grand, complex escape tunnels remains elusive. The simplicity of the Incas' escape, as suggested in the abandonment theories, was to destroy the bridges and allow the jungle to serve as their impenetrable wall. The Temple of the Condor. A final, striking example of the integrated subterranean world is the Temple of the Condor. This site perfectly illustrates the blending of stone carving with a natural rock formation to create a powerful waka. Here, the Inca carved a large flat stone on the floor of a courtyard into the distinct shape of a condor's head, the Andean condor being a powerful intermediary between the upper and middle worlds.
Behind the carved head, two enormous, curving natural stones form the wings, and behind that, a small dark cave or grotto acts as the body and nesting place of the bird. This deliberate architectural pairing transforms the site into a sanctuary for the condor spirit, where rituals may have been performed concerning passage, freedom, and the high-altitude gods. The cave at the back emphasizes the condor's connection to the earth, while the stone bird itself links the earth to the sky. The exploration of Machu Picchu's subterranean world reinforces a key understanding. The city was a complete expression of the Inca universe, Pacha, comprising the upper world, Hanan Pacha, the middle world, Ke Pacha, and the underworld, Ukul Pacha. The temples reached the sky, the plazas represented the Middle Earth, and the caves and carved grottos provided sacred access to the eternal realm below. The profound, damp silence of these hidden spaces offers a deep contrast to the airy heights of the Intihuatana, completing the spiritual journey into the whole of the Inca cosmos.
The lore of the lost city and its remarkable rope bridges is not confined to archaeological books or museum exhibits. It lives, breathes, and continues to be practiced by the Quechua people, the direct linguistic and cultural descendants of the Inca. They are the contemporary guardians of the lore, holding the knowledge that the mountain yielded to Hiram Bingham, but never truly revealed. To understand the longevity of the Inca's secrets, we must understand the strength of the oral tradition and the persistence of communal memory within these high-altitude Andean communities. While the Spanish systematically destroyed the quipus and suppressed the Inca religion, they could not erase the knowledge embedded in the annual cycles of labor, planting, and ritual. The persistence of knowledge. The most powerful demonstration of this living lore is the annual rebuilding of the Quesuachaca Bridge, as detailed in Part 7. This event is not a historical reenactment for tourists. It is a mandatory communal duty, a living, continuous expression of the Mita labor tax. The knowledge required to construct a flexible, load-bearing suspension bridge solely from woven grass is immense. It involves complex mathematics, material science, and knot techniques that have been passed down through specific family lineages for over 5 centuries. The Chacacamayos, bridge masters, are the living repositories of this highly specialized engineering lore. They carry the responsibility of teaching the preparation of the ichu fiber, the twisting process that ensures maximum tensile strength, and the precise, safe methods for anchoring the main cables into the stone abutments. Oral transmission. This knowledge is transferred entirely through demonstration and storytelling. The children of the community learn by watching, helping, and listening to the ancestral narratives that explain why the bridge must sway, why the old ropes must be cut and offered to the river, and why the labor must be communal. Aini in practice. The ritual reinforces Aini, reciprocity, and social cohesion. By working together to span the chasm, the community reinforces its bond, ensuring not only physical passage but social unity. The bridge literally binds them together. The keepers of the Apus. In the communities surrounding Machu Picchu, the ancient spiritual geography remains intact.
The mountain peaks are still regarded as Apus, powerful living deities who control the weather, fertility, and fate. The local Quechua guides and farmers still perform small private rituals, offerings of coca leaves, corn, or alcohol, to petition the Apus for safe passage, good harvest, and protection from landslides. This reverence for the land provides a crucial context for understanding the stone city. Where outsiders see ruins, the local community sees a huaca, a sacred place still inhabited by the spirits of their ancestors, including the great Pachacuti. Machu Picchu as a sacred landscape. For many Quechua, Machu Picchu is a pilgrimage site, a place to honor the lineage and the spirit of Inca ingenuity. Their oral histories often contain stories about the purpose of the city that complement or complicate the archaeological theories. Stories about medicinal plants, specific rituals, and the roles of individual families within the royal estate. The challenge of modernity. The contemporary guardians face the immense challenge of maintaining these traditions amidst rapid modernization and the massive influx of tourism. The preservation of the Quechua, for instance, requires official recognition and support to compete against the economic pressures that draw younger generations away from the rigorous communal labor. The role of the contemporary Quechua has evolved into being the cultural interpreters of the site, bridging the gap between historical artifact and living culture. Their soft voices explaining the purpose of a terrace or the orientation of a window imbue the silent stones with the context of a continuous, unbroken tradition of respect for the land and the cosmos. They are the keepers of the deep, slow rhythm of the Andes. Their continued dedication to the ancient engineering of grass and the spiritual integrity of the mountains ensures that the lore of Machu Picchu remains a story of resilience, a tale of a civilization that survives not in monuments of gold, but in the memory of its people and the strength of its rope bridges.
The unveiling of Machu Picchu to the world brought with it not only awe, but also the complex modern challenges of heritage management, a story defined by the struggle between conservation, tourism, and the essential issue of restitution. This final chapter of the lore deals with the human and political effort to protect the ancient silence of the stone city. The debate on restitution. The Yale artifacts. As detailed in Part 2, Hiram Bingham III removed thousands of artifacts from Machu Picchu during his early 20th century expeditions. These included ceramics, metal objects, stone tools, and human remains, which were transported to Yale University in the United States for study under an agreement with the Peruvian government that stipulated their eventual return. The subsequent decades saw a rising global awareness regarding cultural patrimony and the right of origin countries to house and study their own heritage. The Peruvian government, driven by national pride and a commitment to preserving their history, began a protracted diplomatic and legal battle to secure the return of the artifacts. The debate centered on profound questions of ownership. Does the act of discovery by a foreign entity grant intellectual ownership, or does the physical origin of the artifacts mandate their return to their homeland?
Peru argued that the artifacts were vital for understanding the full context of the site and for national identity. Yale argued for the educational and scientific value of keeping the collection intact for global scholarship. The long diplomatic struggle culminated in the early 21st century. In 2011, a landmark agreement was reached, and the majority of the collection was formally returned to Peru. This act of restitution was a pivotal moment, affirming the principle that the tangible pieces of the lost city belong back with the people whose ancestors built them. The artifacts now reside in a dedicated museum in Cuzco, enriching the local scholarship and completing a powerful cycle of return. The challenge of tourism. Machu Picchu is one of the world's most visited archaeological sites, a distinction that is both a blessing and a curse. The revenue generated by tourism provides essential funding for Peru, but the sheer volume of visitors poses an existential threat to the delicate, centuries-old infrastructure. Physical erosion. Millions of footsteps, year after year, cause the stone paths and stairways to wear down. The humidity from large groups of people accelerates the growth of lichens and mosses, and the sheer weight of crowds can stress the terraces. Balancing access and preservation. Peruvian authorities and international conservation bodies face the continuous dilemma of limiting access without crippling the local economy. Strict measures, including visitor limits, one-way circuits, and restrictions on areas of fragile stonework, have been implemented to slow the inevitable decay caused by human presence. The preservation effort is an ongoing, subtle war against time and popularity. It requires continuous geological monitoring to track subtle shifts in the slopes, constant maintenance of the complex drainage system to prevent landslides, and meticulous restoration work on the ancient walls and roofs. The success of preservation is measured not by new discoveries, but by the maintenance of the status quo, ensuring the silent city endures for future generations. Protecting the sacred landscape. The preservation of Machu Picchu extends beyond the stone walls to the entire historical sanctuary, a vast area protecting the high-altitude cloud forest and the Inca roads. This area is recognized by UNESCO for its unparalleled cultural and ecological value, reinforcing that the city cannot be separated from its profound, sacred landscape. The modern effort to protect the lore of Machu Picchu is the ultimate expression of the Inca principle of permanence. Where the ancient builders used their genius to make the stone last forever, the contemporary guardians use science, diplomacy, and careful regulation to ensure that the memory, the integrity, and the enduring silence of the city survive for future generations. The act of returning the artifacts and carefully managing the crowds closes the circle, ensuring that the remnants of the lost city can continue to tell their story on their own terms in their own homeland.
The lost city and the secret of the Inca rope bridges endure. They teach us that resilience is found in flexibility, that strength is built through community, and that the greatest mysteries are those that human genius leaves deliberately unsolved. The memory of the ropes sways gently in the deep Andean wind, and the stone holds fast to the sky.